we're good to go.
Well, good. Welcome. I'm Nan Peterson with the Charlotte Development Center. I'm in the planning department. I'll be presenting this afternoon's session, which is a general overview, of the UDO, and I'll be presenting with my colleague Solomon Fortune.
Hello, I'm Solomon Fortune. I am commercial zoning supervisor here for the city of Charlotte in the Land Development Center. And like I said, I will be co-hosting, trying to give a portion of this presentation to help inform you of the UDO.
We are going to turn this over to some introductory remarks from Shannon Frye, who is our planning division manager in the land development section of planning, with the Charlotte Development Center. Shannon, we're going to turn it over to you for now.
Thank you, Nan. Good afternoon and a happy belated New Year to everyone. My co-workers who've just been identified are part of the Charlotte Development Center. And this is a space in the government center that is interdepartmental. And in that space, we currently administer sections of the city code across various departments who have now been incorporated into the Unified Development Ordinance. And in our efforts to engage folks in the community about our role in the implementation of the Unified Development Ordinance, Nan and an internal work team have worked to come up with a series of sessions that we want to host. Couple housekeeping things from myself that aren't in the presentation here is we some of us have been together for a long time, and I know we've got some folks who are on this call who are new. And we are trying to do an all-in approach on this. The major change here is the departments in the city have been collaborating over the years to administer the city code. And as I'm saying, all of our prospective rules have been incorporated into a single document. There's been expanded rules that have been included that go from your individual lot of your property owner up to large scale developments. So if for any reason who's not here today and you see from where you work and who you partner with, if we should certainly bring more folks into this educational opportunity that we've programmed. This is not meant to be exclusive of anyone. So please, you'll find at times this may seem technical, but it is a large 600+ page document that we're trying to bring all of us along in alignment of understanding it and what it means for each of our particular areas of interest or expertise. So with that said, I want to turn it back over to Nan and Solomon to run the show. Thank you all for coming this afternoon.
Thank you, Shannon. Well, just want to go over some housekeeping or some protocols. As Shannon mentioned, this is going to be a joint venture with our fellow agencies that are housed in the Charlotte Development Center. And our staff will be narrating these presentations. Like we said, today's presentations are from the planning team, Solomon and myself. We are asking because we have a huge audience, which we think is wonderful. But you can only imagine how over 200 people, how to monitor questions and things of that nature. So we're asking you to use the chat function in the Zoom calls. And for this session, we're going to answer those questions at the end of the presentation. And if time allows, obviously answer any additional questions that are submitted through chat. And if a question for some reason cannot be answered at this session or in any of our additional 9 sessions, we will so note it and follow up with a response that we'll post on the UDO website. And we will also review before at the next session. And just going to ask, if you're not mute, to put yourself on mute, that would be great.
Just check me on 1 second. I think we were trying to mute. Gotcha, man. You're good to go.
Okay. We do have a mission statement for the UDO University. The purpose of the university is to acquaint attendees with the City of Charlotte's requirements and processes affiliated with the city's Unified Development Ordinance, known as the UDO. Comments made at the university sessions are intended to provide guidance and are non-binding on formal reviews of development plans. So what's our purpose today? Our purpose today is to have a general presentation about a general introduction to the UDO. We don't want to make the assumption, as when Solomon and I look at the list, we saw a lot of you know this probably even better than Solomon and myself at this point, but we also know there are a lot of folks in there who don't even know what a UDO is or what a UDO stands for or what's contained in it. So today's session is just a general overview of the city's new UDO. We hope to answer questions, what is included in the UDO, and also hope this helps you understand how the UDO is organized and what is contained in each of the UDO articles, which you can see on the screen. It is intended to clarify and build awareness on standards in the UDO. So what's been happening since this UDO has been adopted? The adoption actually came in August of last year of 2022. In September, we opened up a portal to start accepting and hopefully answering questions about the UDO in a general sense, as opposed to specific, on my site questions. We did clarify some questions about the permit choice investing, and we're going to be going over that in a couple minutes. But you can see now, January of 2023, the university opens. And the effective date, this is important, is June 1st of 2023. There has been some folks who assume that once it was adopted in August that it is accepted, but we have this time until June 1st to get this training out, the education out, and then we'll be accepting plans based on the new UDO. But what staff has been doing in the meantime, as you can only imagine what an 800-page document is with lots of technical information, is trying to get this incorporated into our work processes and our applications. So for one thing, we were working on some toolboxes. We've updated tree guidelines. We're in the process of updating the land development standards manual and our GIS layers. We do know that we do have to have some process improvements and updates. So we're developing new and updating our current projects intake process to incorporate some of the UDO submittal requirements. And there's also needs to be an establishment of a UDO board. So those rules and procedures need to be evaluated and actually formed. We're doing massive technology updates to our database, which is called Excella. We're updating current workflows for these UDO requirements. And we also need to create some new records and workflows to incorporate, again, all these requirements. And we're also partnering with our partners in the development community. We did establish that UDO question portal. Later on, we'll talk about an email box that we've created to for you to be able to place questions. We were creating this UDO University, and we do continued outreach to communicate, educate, and solicit feedback. So as you can only imagine, we have a legacy ordinance, which we're currently working in, and then we're going to have the new UDO. So there has to be some transition period in there. And a lot of questions, again, I want to say this is all beginning on June 1st of this year. A lot of questions folks have asked us is, how does this affect, like, when can I submit? When does it switch to the new UDO? And questions that are really very critical to their monitoring their projects. So one of the questions everybody asks is, what is permit choice? And this was established by state law. And if the UDO becomes effective after a development permit application is submitted, but before the permit decision is made, or in our case, we call approved, applicant may choose to use the pre-UDO or the UDO regulations after the effective date. Permit choice applies to development permits if applicants place applications on hold for 6 consecutive months or more. Permit choice no longer applies. And when multiple development permits are required, applicants may choose to utilize the regulations applied to the initial development permit for subsequent development permits filed within 18 months of the initial approval. Please note, sign permits and soil erosion control permits are not considered initial permits. and permit choice does not apply to rezonings or sketch plans. Another question we get is like, what is vesting? And this too is established by state law. A statutory vested right is a validity period for a particular development permit approval and runs with the land. Common law vesting is established by substantial expenditures relying on good faith on a valid permit, and vested right becomes effective on a day of approval. Different validity periods apply from different development types. Conditional rezonings are 2 to 5 years. Multi-phase development, this is 25 acres or greater. Conditional CD plans include uses and intensifies by phase. Those are valid for 7 years. Preliminary subdivision plans are 3 years, and development permits are 1 year. And again, vested rights do not apply to sketch plan submittals. So how are these city initiatives connected? Many of you might have heard of the 2040 plan. The 2040 plan is the city's vision. This is our policies and plans. This policy is for guidance for growth and development. So now how do you make that vision be implemented? And that's the creation of the UDO. So this is how they're all linked together. So why develop a UDO? The UDO was developed to be the primary regulatory tool for implementation of the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan. The UDO was created to create more predictability for future development, to align all development regulations so that they seamlessly work together, to include current best practices and revised development standards, to consolidate development regulations into a single document with all regulations related to a specific topic in one place, and to create a more user-friendly ordinance. We hoped we have simplified terms and created a common language and increased the use of graphics, and to comply with the North Carolina 160D legislation, which was passed in July of 2021. So the UDO, this is a brief outline of how the UDO is set up. There are introductory provisions. We go into the zoning districts, zoning uses, and general development standards. There's a section on subdivision, streets, and other infrastructure. Sections and articles on stormwater and natural resources. And there's articles on the UDO administration, nonconformities, and enforcement.
So as you guys can see on this slide, the UDO is organized into 13 parts. Each part contains one or more of the UDO's 40 articles. And as part of this class, we're going to teach you like part 1 is the ordinance and its introduction, which contains the title, purpose, and applicability. And as giving it to the general in the common terms, the applicability is what it applies to the areas of the city in which it does apply, which is to us is the city of Charlotte, and it's in the ETJA and everything that we are responsible for providing zoning review and land development reviews for. Article 2 is our rules of constructions and abbreviations and definitions, and that is where you will find that we define general terms that we use throughout the ordinance. And that way we did it this way, so that way there's a common term that, for example, lot is defined through the entire ordinance, and that way we're using one definition as in previous ordinances. Lot was meant different for different reviewing agencies, had different meanings and different terms. The biggest change we see is part 2, which is zoning. And that's in Article 3. And Article 3 has your zoning districts, the zoning maps, your frontage types. This is where you determine your setbacks and how you site your building on the site. Going into your other districts, we now get into Article 4, which is your neighborhood 1 zoning districts. And those are typically your single family duplexes on lots. And then we've made some modification, which would allow theirs. In subsequent classes, we will go further in depth and explain your uses and what you can do along those lots and how someone would use the ordinance if someone had a development project. Article 5 is your neighborhood zoning districts, where you're starting to get into townhomes and a little large multifamily and some larger other, some other non-residential uses. When you start getting into part 4, you're now getting into Article 6, which has your commercial zoning, which is typically, that is your, business districts, think of like McDonald's, gas stations, things of that nature. Article 7 is your campus zoning, and that is for your larger campuses. So think of like Atrium Health, Novant's campus. There's some large church campuses that we have that are throughout the community, and that's typically what that zoning district's for. Article 8, your manufacturing, logistics, and zoning districts. That is typically, which was in the old legacy code, which we I1 and I2. That is where we are now putting that in there for some of our different type uses for basically industrial uses. Article 9 is a mixed use. It's kind of part industrial, but it also allows for some retail combination, kind of think of like some of those areas of town which are transitioning from, they still have some industrial uses, but we're also seeing things like breweries, small retail, some shops that still need that. The area is transitioning, but we also want to be able to give the area also that flexibility to have some of those industrial uses around there. Part 5 is our center zoning district. That is where we are getting into kind of our neighborhood center, community activity center, and our regional activity center, and then also our transit oriented development districts. Our neighborhood center and our community activity center, think of those as, it's kind of like some of them would be your Food Lions and Harris Teeters on the corners. Where we start getting into community activity center, you're now getting into a larger shopping center. So you kind of, North Lake Mall falls kind of in between that community activity center. And whereas regional activity centers also could be North Lake Mall, depending upon how it's designed. But like today, I would say a regional activity center would be like South Park, where it is where we have the mall and then we have everything growing around there. We have those roads and transportation networks being able to support the uses. Our TOD districts are typically used around our station areas, and we have in the ordinance, we define where we have placed those, and typically are along our transit lines. Some of our proposed future, bus rapid transit, just depends upon what's been adopted in the language that's based upon in the UDO. Our special purpose in Article 14, Part 6, our special purpose and overlay zoning districts. Those are our overlays. Those would be like our airport overlays, some of those other things that we have had in the ordinance. There are some special ones that we have made for certain types of residential uses that we have allowed. And that's what that section is going to go through. Article 15 is probably the one that most people get concerned and have more questions about. That is going to be your use regulations. Also in Article 15, that is where we start defining uses. And that's where we also, in here, we have separated our use definitions. We have put them in Article 15. Going into Part 8, general development standards, our zoning standards. This is our general development regulations. Your requirements for your accessory structures in Article 17. Article 18 talks about required architectural features if it applies to your proposed use in your development project. Article 19 is your off-street vehicle and bicycle parking. Article 20 is typically loading in service areas for proposed use. Article 21 is talking about how we have, which would back in the legacy code would refer to your landscape buffer yards and necessary screening for like parking use, transformers and different type of uses that we have in the ordinance. And then Article 22 relates to signs. And we have just, as everybody knows, we actually updated the sign code about 2 or 3 years ago. And we basically have taken the same thing and with some minor modifications in that section of the code. As now we get into getting out of zoning, this is where we have put Part 9 is our stormwater and natural resources. And this is where you're going to find, like in Article 23, the water supply, those are all called the old watershed. You also have your drainage section and requirements. Article 25 is post-construction. That's your stormwater. Kind of think of it as it was the old post-construction ordinance. This is where it is. Surface water improvement management and buffers, your floodplain regulations, soil and erosion sediment control, and your tree protection, and which is bringing in all the others such as our erosion control reviewers, tree ordinance, and surface, like I said, post-construction and the surface waters all bring into this one section. Moving on to Article 10, which is subdivision, streets, and infrastructure. This is the section that deals with between subdivision and the Charlotte Department of Transportation. This is how we determine if with Prothlink, if your site is required to have streets and how you can and how what regulations you have to comply with when you're trying to subdivide land. So in Article 30, it's the introduction to the subdivision, streets, and infrastructure. Article 31 has the requirements of if you are looking to subdivide land and what your requirements and what is required as part of that subdivision process. Article 32 is going to relate to the network, which is, this is where you find how you find your public and private network required streets. We've also added in the UDO cross access, so that way we can have access between similar uses. And that way we can have that access to cut down on traffic on our, the network required streets, public streets. And then also in here is driveway regulations that would determine how you design and where your driveways can be located. In Article 33, it gets into when new streets are required and what transportation improvements would be required for any new development that is proposed. And then Article 34 gets into the standards for streets, any off-street public paths and cross access. And those standards basically are telling you how those would have to be designed and what's required for those and what is necessary for your use when you're going through here. And then Article 35 is basically other infrastructure that we get into. It's the miscellaneous like bus stops, utility easements, things like that. Part 11 is our administration, and our administration talks about our ordinance, is the ordinance bodies and the administrators, and basically it defines the administrators of each section who governs the UDO and their definition of where they're housed. The general processes basically are talking about how we are going to go through and how we are setting the ordinance up and how those ordinance bodies and how the procedures and process you have to file. Think of it as kind of like if you're going to go and seek a variance from any of the standards. And then if there's a tree ordinance variance, things like that, that's where that starts to get into. And the amendments and the development approvals are basically speaking of how any amendments to like conditional zoning and then the development approval process that we have. Article 12 is going to relate to nonconformities, and we have this section is because obviously as we transition away from our old legacy code, we know that we're trying to, as staff is looking through, when we adopted the ordinance, we tried to minimize nonconformities as much as possible, but we know that obviously sometimes there are some there's some unintended consequences, things that we try to think, but we realize that sites that are old, because we have sites out there that were probably developed 5 ordinances ago and they are still operating today, and we know that we had to have a section of how we help them in regard to any type of expansion, any type of uses, and if they ever need to go through permits and if they need to redevelop certain parts of the building, that's what we use this section for. And then part 13 is enforcement. And that is basically like code enforcement, how we, how enforce things. It lays out the process that the city goes through. If government deems that someone may be in violation of this ordinance and the requirements that they have. Oh, hold up. I'm sorry. It looks like our computer froze up here. We're trying to get it to go to the next sheet. We can go ahead. So as the UDO University, we have broken it out into 10 sessions, starting from today's date, going all the way to the end of March. And typically they're from 1 to 2:30. And obviously this first session is just as an overview. Next Friday on the 20th, we are trying to do zoning districts in the UDO, and we're going to start going into more depth about the zoning districts, kind of how to use it, what the ordinance entails, and some of your use. And then the next one would be tree protection and those requirements by urban forestry. And the next one after that would be subdivision on 2/3/23. And we're trying to get to that slide, I'm sorry, so that we can see this, but I didn't want to, I know your time is valuable. And then the next one on 2/10, we're going to be doing neighborhood zoning districts. And that will start talking about some of our more of the residential uses and some of the requirements and how we, some of the things that we would be looking for that, and like setbacks, how you do that and how you determine, your frontages and things of that nature for your residential. And then on 217, it would be another overview of the whole administration section. And that's going to be, like I said, on the 17th. And then the next one on 224 is going to be our standards in the UDO, our stormwater standards, and that would be that class. And then on 3.3, we're going to go over the parking and landscape and screening and open space requirements in the UDO. And then on 3.10, we are going to do required new streets and improvements standards and go over that section. And then on 3.17, we're going to go over residential permitting and that process.
Yeah, on the residential permitting, that has changed. There will be new requirements for our stormwater team and our urban forestry teams to be looking at, there we go, at single family permitting. And that will all be explained at that time. And as Solomon did say, we do have 10 sessions. Today was just going to be a general overview of the UDO. Registration, obviously, as you know, is required for each session. I know there's been some confusion. Why can't I sign up for one? This allows us to record each session. And if you want to specifically go back to hear one session, or if you just are interested in one of the sessions, you can just sign up for that session. What else? All these are recorded. As I stated, we will be posting these on our UDO website, and we'll be sending out links to that. And as Solomon did say, he will be handling in his team a lot of the zoning sessions, but we do have our partners with stormwater and CDOT who will also be incorporated into these presentations and subdivision to go over their sections of the UDO. There is helpful resources available on the UDO. As you know, the website is www.charlotteudo.org, and you can see the UDO University tab to register for our courses. And this is where we'll be posting our recordings, and also multiple of helpful resources that our other teams, our other partners in the planning department have already published and have available on the website. If you have any questions, we did have that UDO portal, but right now we're going to transition into a little bit more streamlined approach where we're actually going to have an email address, and I will send this out, and I will be posting it on the UDO website and on the Charlotte Development Center website. We've created an email address as CLTUDO questions, one word, @charlottenc.gov. This is going to be monitored by staff Monday through Friday from 8 to 5 o'clock, and the questions will be answered to staff. We have come up with a system where they'll be directed to the appropriate staff member to answer the question, and then they will be copied to those of us who are monitoring the mailbox, and then we will be posting general questions and answers on our website, again, to use as another education tool. Obviously, it's going to be monitored by staff Monday through Friday, but it's open 24/7. So feel free to start sending your questions directly to that site. And now that is the end of our presentation. We're going to now turn it over to chat and hopefully be able to answer some of your questions. Again, if you have any questions now, the chat room was open, so please feel free to type in your questions, comments, and we're ready to go with that function.
All right, you do have a couple of questions in the chat. I'm going to start with the first one that came in. Suzanne asks, are there checklists for the regulations? Are there any checklists that can help make sure we aren't missing anything?
Right now, staff is working on that. But once we have those checklists finalized, we will be able to provide those to the public. And yes, you'd be able to use those checklists to see what we're looking for and things that you consider as part of for any proposal that you submit.
Awesome. Morris states, I live in a neighborhood that has a neighborhood association. Would someone be available to come to one of our neighborhood association meetings to discuss the new UDO, particularly as to how it will affect their neighborhood?
Yes, we will. Typically what we do is if you just email us, and if it's not Nan or myself, there's someone from I have very capable people on my team that will be happy to go out and talk to you. Like I said, all we just ask is if you give us, try to give us as much leeway time, because again, right now we are receiving numerous requests to go, but we are always happy to go out and help the citizens.
And what we'll do is drop Nan's email. Is that okay? Because you showed it on the screen. So drop that in the chat so that you have it. Charlena asks if the February 17th session is different from today's session. And I believe that's the administration session.
Yeah, I think that's that.
Yes. So on the February 17th one, we will be talking about we'll be going into depth about the UDO and the administration. And that section is basically talking about all the administrators that, I guess, basically with the administrators, if a citizen or developer has a question about how a process, we would tell them that's the administrator who makes that call based on that section. If there's a conflict in the ordinance, or if we need to make an interpretation, that's that administrator who's responsible for that section of the UDO would be making that determination, and we will walk through how that's going to be done and the processes that they have to follow and what's necessary.
That's a board, right, Solomon?
There's the board, and then there's also the actual individual administrators
Okay.
who are responsible themselves. So it's possible that there will be questions that won't have to go to the board, that staff would have to be able to answer and provide.
Thank you. Thomas asks, what is the status of the text amendment to this ordinance? And how can we get a draft of those proposed changes?
So as some people know, there was a text amendment proposed. We will have to follow up with you, Thomas, and give you Laura Harmon's contact information. As you know, staff, the implementation team has provided comments, but we are not running that process of that. So we will have to follow up with you on that one.
And Thomas, we should have your email from registration. We'll be able to reach out to you with any follow-up via your registration. Stas asks, when will the presentation cover, which session will cover residential zoning?
Well, I think it's going to be a combination, wouldn't it, Solomon? Because you're going to be talking about it in the zoning districts. And then also in residential permitting, which is the new process to incorporate other folks.
And then we're also going to be talking about the neighborhood zoning districts on February the 10th.
Okay.
I'm sorry, got a couple more came in and it moved. Keith asks, where would I find bus stop requirements?
It's in there. I believe it's in subdivision streets and other infrastructure section. I believe it is Article 35, but I will follow up to verify that, because again, I know for that.
Okay. Jill asks, with this new format for development impacting communities throughout Charlotte, have you considered any specific ways to help non-developers or neighborhoods communicate their concerns or issues? I do know that you guys are still accepting. I know, Nan, you had showed the slide where you're accepting comments, questions through your email. We were doing that online. Would that still be a format to be able
Yes,
to
ma'am.
share that email in order to receive some of maybe Jill's concerns, or folks in her neighborhood that might have concerns via those, just questions?
Absolutely.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's going to be an open mailbox, and it's easier to use on the portal. So you can use common language that I understand. That's why I have my interpreter here for the zoning language. But yeah, that's what that creation of that mailbox was, to be a little bit more user friendly, customer friendly, specifically for our citizens who do have questions. So yeah.
And Jill, feel free to share that. I think we were going to drop that in the chat as well, but just to reiterate, all of these sessions are recorded, and they will be made available online for you to access, so that you can still go back to the presentation. If you miss something, or you want to go back and review a slide, you can stop the recording to see the presentation where it was. And please feel free, and we ask that you share this in your networks. Okay. Eddie, I think I might have answered your question without knowing that that was the question, but yes, these will be available for playback. We will share that with the attendee list as well as they will be online. John asks, please talk further about the text amendment Thomas mentioned. I think we would all be interested in to know some items being proposed. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Solomon, you mentioned that, and I don't know, maybe you were referencing the UDO team being able to answer some things more specific. So if you
Yes,
can.
yes, Laura Harmon's team, the UDO team, they are handling that process and they have the list of things that they are looking to update. But basically, in general, it was for when we got the UDO adopted, we knew there were some things that needed to be further hashed out, and we had to work out some other language. We found some things that, and so if we found some unintended consequences, things like that, but her team will be able to explain everything that has been submitted from everybody who put information into the portal.
Walter asked, will the new streets manual be discussed in, I'm assuming, any of these sessions? Would we have any discussion around the streets manual, which I think comes out of CDOT, if I'm not?
I
Yes,
believe so. Yes, they're going to do that during their presentation.
Okay. And I don't, let's see if we can go back and.
And let me look at their day. I believe it looks like, Walter, it'll either be on, they will talk either on 2/3 on February the 3rd, and they also have an opportunity on March 10th.
And Jill, it looks like you were asking after it becomes standard. I still think that that would still apply. I don't think that email will not be accessible. That Nan mentioned to receive any comments or questions, it's not going to go away June 1st, right, Nan?
Oh.
People could still reach out after that point.
Of course.
Okay.
Of course, absolutely.
Oh,
And
thanks,
actually,
Eric.
Yolanda, I want to say though, our contact information too is available on the Charlotte Development Center website. So any way that's easier for folks to reach out to us, please feel free to do so.
And it looks like Eric kind of helped us out here and says that Article 32 has the bus stop info.
Yeah,
So
I caught it. I saw
Thank you.
the
Thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
Suzanne asks, where can I find light rail information? Where can I find regulations for light rail projects?
So I guess we need a little more clarification when you say light rail projects. Because I guess I say right now our standards are in the is for TOD. Those are our those are our transit districts. But if you're asking about projects yourself, we would need, I guess, if you could give us the parcel or address, we could help you find it, and then we could also get you in contact with some of our people in CATS, with Charlotte Area Transit System. I'm sorry.
Okay. Walter asks, which section of the UDO will contain the streets standards?
So I guess Walter, when you're asking for street standards, what do you mean? Because as you know as well, I'm sorry, the city also has a land development standards manual that is going to be updated right now. That standards manual carries when someone says if they have to build a certain street cross section, that standards manual, we're in the process of updating that. That typically, if you're referring to that manual is going to be updated separate of, is updated separately from the UDO, and we are working on that process currently. I believe Brendan Smith and Seattle and some others, actually all of us across the development center, are working on that process.
Nick asked a question that I think I can actually answer, hopefully. He asked, when will the zoning map and citywide rezoning occur to rezone old districts to the new districts? So we will, if you are in relation to, and this seems like alignment rezoning, that process will kick off this year. We are in the process of ramping up for that, but that will be a multi-year process. As you know, we have a really large city, so that will kick off in conjunction with our community area planning process shortly. So this spring, actually. And then Kate has also dropped in the chat the email address. And again, please share as far and wide. We will be sure as we push this information out or do these recordings to add that there as well so that you have it to ask any additional questions, or if people in your neighborhoods or anyone you know might have questions that weren't able to attend today, they will be able to ask questions as well. Looks like we got a couple more coming in. Thomas, so the area plans are to be completed prior to the translation rezoning for those parcels. It's in conjunction. Well, translation has already happened within the UDO as it adopted on June 1st, but alignment rezoning will happen in conjunction with community area planning. So it's a simultaneous process. Sorry, I was having a Friday. John asks, Nick, the old districts that are subject to he was answering a question, I think, will be changed automatically on June, effective date June 1st. Thank you, John, for that response. And I think we have come to the end of the chat questions. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to add those in the chat. We are here to answer those. All right, Natalia, and I hope I'm saying your name right. It looks like the density requirements, units per acre or FAR, have been removed from the zoning district requirements, except for the stormwater chapters. If not, could you advise where those are located now, please?
So to answer your question, you are correct. With the UDO, we have gone away from density and FAR. It's basically, it's kind of a hybrid between a form-based, or basically think of it as, if you have a lot and you're meeting these requirements, and if this is what you can stick in that kind of like that, I kind of describe it as a tent, you would be able to do it, and you just have to comply with those standards. So the answer to your question is yes, we have gone away from the old traditional, R3, which is, 3 units in a perfect world, 3 units per acre.
Walter, it looks like you have your hand up. Thomas, then I hope that was jovial, that this is a text-only conversation, not necessarily. We can, I'm assuming your question is a little more than being able to type in the chat. So let me see if I can give you just a couple of minutes to unmute and ask your question.
Thanks. I just wanted to try to clarify my question that Solomon responded to. This is the document that the City Council adopted along with the new tree ordinance and the new UDO back in August. And it's never been clear to me whether this would be one of the many sections in the UDO, or if it is a separate freestanding document that's not part of the UDO. Land Development Standards Manual is a separate freestanding document and always has been. I've never been clear on exactly what this document was. Would it be in the UDO or separate freestanding? That was my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right now, it's a separate freestanding document.
Thanks, Solomon.
We have a question from Josh. Are there changes to the ADU requirements? What are the ADU requirements listed? And I don't know if that is specified in a different session or if.
There are some changes, but it's like very minor. But it's in Article 17. They're accessory structures.
Okay. Brandon, it's a separate freestanding document. Thank you, Brandon. It looks like he was answering that question as well about the streets manual, which again is managed by or through CDOT. So if there are any questions specific to that, I'm sure they're more than happy to answer those. If there are any more questions. Thank you, John. He said that you guys have provided a great session. He's looking forward to future sessions. We don't happen to have any more questions? You guys are ready to go with the UDO, right? Maybe I should coin that. Looking forward to the tree session. Linda, thank you for being here. Thomas also agrees with John. We do not want to hold you all. We definitely thank you for attending. And if you happen to have questions, we can definitely stick around. I know. Additionally, please use that email address to ask any questions you may have.
And then, yes, and if anybody has any questions from this session or upcoming sessions, if you can put them in that email box, we'd be happy. So that way we can kind of incorporate them into the presentation. So that way, because just like everybody, I'm pretty sure you're not the only one that, if you're answering your question, I'm pretty sure other people have the same question. I just want to thank you guys for taking your time on a Friday, and we appreciate Liz giving us the opportunity to provide this information to you.